Hello friends, my name is Melody and you are listening to Melodies, Musings, and Music. Well, tonight it will be musings. I want to share with you a true story that I experienced 20 years ago when a hurricane, Hurricane Rita, came through the Houston area following on the heels of Katrina, the big one that hit Louisiana that same year. This was 2005. Believe it or not, I was looking at my notes on this story and I actually wrote it in 2007 on this very day, November 30th. Number synchronicities. Wow. I didn't plan it that way. Okay, so I'm going to just get right down to the story itself, and then we can discuss other details later. But my purpose for sharing this story is to demonstrate that when major disasters happen, like hurricanes, and we as civilians find ourselves having to deal with the fallout from that storm or whatever, and we discover along the way people who are abusing their power in the midst of a civilian disaster. My point is to prove that even a voice or two can make a difference to keep those kind of things from happening a second time or the next time a big storm approaches. It'll start to make sense when you hear the story itself, but this is going to be a little bit longer than some of my other videos, so you might want to get comfortable, kick off your shoes, grab yourself a beverage or a snack or both, and sit back and listen to this one, folks, because it's going to blow your mind. I wrote this story and titled it, "The Texas State Guard, Friend or Foe?" The doors of the large Baptist church, now turned Red Cross shelter, burst open as a small military brigade consisting of a commander and 6 uniformed armed soldiers marched into the center of the auditorium, surrounded by over 200 stunned Hurricane Rita evacuees. Placing a bullhorn to his lips, the commander shouted the following speech as if scripted. "We are the Texas State Guard, and we are here to make sure that we're going to take over this shelter and make sure that you follow the rules and let you know that you will suffer the consequences if you don't." And for the next 10 minutes, he proceeded to scream the rules at the evacuees and took pleasure in describing in great detail what would be done with those who chose not to obey them. This, despite the fact that written copies of the facility rules had already been distributed to the evacuees the day before. And up until this moment, the atmosphere in the shelter had been calm as could be expected under the circumstances. When he finished his speech, the commander looked over the top of his Hollywood sunglasses that he was wearing, grinned, and said, "Y'all have a nice day now, you hear?" With that, leaving 3 soldiers behind, he whirled on his heels and swiftly left the building, leaving heretofore peaceful, now traumatized evacuees staring with trepidation at the MPs that were left in charge. You've probably heard the words of Edmund Burke, 17th century British statesman and philosopher, many times in your life. He said, and I quote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." Unquote. To the average 21st century American, this statement may conjure up thoughts of the War on Terror or the Axis of Evil. But what happens when factions of one's own government or military instigates evil actions against law-abiding citizens during times of natural disaster or other threat? How can we, as comparatively powerless individual citizens, successfully resist, much less expose, the intimidation tactics, arrogance, and corruption of those who are sworn to protect and serve us? The answer can be found in 3 powerful words. We take action. By now, you've seen or heard plenty of reports in the news media about a lack of gasoline or water and roadside assistance during the massive evacuation before Hurricane Rita, which happened in September of 2005, and also which led to 100 citizen deaths along the Texas evacuation routes. But one story you may not be familiar with is how a renegade brigade of the Texas State Guard overstepped its authority during Hurricane Rita's shelter operations in Lufkin, Texas, and blatantly violated written orders from both the governor of Texas and the Texas State Guard's own code of conduct. It's also a story of how action taken by evacuees who later voiced concerns got results that are nothing short of astonishing. And it's a story guaranteed to make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It all started when Hurricane Rita entered the Gulf of Mexico and made a beeline for the Gulf Coast, setting off chain reactions as millions of people attempted to evacuate cities bordering the Gulf. Dispelling the myth. Big Brother and the military has your back in a crisis. Don't count on it. During the evacuation of South Texas in the wake of Hurricane Rita, it was glaringly apparent that government, local emergency management officials were not at all prepared for such a chaotic event. Additionally, it was clear that the Texas State Guard, which is the organization, I might remind you, that is charged with managing dozens of Red Cross shelters across East Texas during Rita, as the storm headed in that direction, they were sorely unprepared for the enormity of the task. Granted, many military personnel from the Texas State Guard and the National Guard and the Coast Guard had just returned from Katrina in Louisiana. So regrouping only to cover the counties targeted by Rita was an extreme challenge. However, this fact doesn't excuse state officials for not anticipating the needs of Texas citizens, nor does it provide adequate justification for government negligence, especially when considering the taxpayers who fund government tend to view civic investment as an insurance policy to protect them during troubled times. And the fact that law-abiding citizens do not expect to, or deserve to suffer neglect or abuse at the hands of military personnel assigned to hurricane shelter management duties, and you've got a recipe with potential for litigation. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Hundreds of Gulf Coast evacuees found themselves at the mercy of a renegade brigade of the Texas State Guard. Serious questions were raised about how much authority the Texas State Guard actually possesses when called upon to serve. Case in point, the Renegade Brigade. The Texas State Guard boasts 6 land regiments, otherwise known as military police brigades, along with their air, naval, and medical units, all strategically located across the state and standing ready to serve. Despite the fact that the land regiments are labeled military police brigades, according to an internal memo written by a Texas Brigadier General, quote, "The only MP mission the MP brigades have ever conducted was parking cars." It is clear that the Texas State Guard organization as a whole does not condone or support broad use of military police tactics unless authorized by the governor of Texas. However, apparently not all brigade commanders across the state of Texas accept the Brigadier General's interpretation of how MP brigades and related missions are defined. The commander of the 19th Brigade pushed back regarding the events that occurred in Lufkin, Texas during Operation Rita, stating in a heated memo to the Brigadier General, the adjunct general placed the entire command in harm's way with no protective gear as is required by law, that is, helmets, flak vests, asp batons, or pepper spray, to defend themselves from felons and criminals and unruly citizens. Seems he did not hold evacuees in very high regard. In the same memo, he claims that Governor of Texas, while attending an emergency management briefing with Texas State Guard commanders, mayors, and county officials, authorized and concurred publicly as to the law enforcement role of his forces by stating, "It's done, make it happen." When responding to questions about whether guardsmen would be allowed to carry weapons and use force as needed. Trouble is, according to internal email notes from other Texas State Guard commanders who were there, no one else present heard the governor make that statement that day. And that's not all. In fact, as far back as June and August of 2003, an edition of the 19th Brigade's internal newsletter, articles abound detailing the extent to which military police recruitment and training was being promoted, conducted, and condoned within the brigade. In 2005, the Texas State Guard brass conducted an internal investigation of the largely clandestine activities of the 19th Brigade. They were reportedly stunned at what they discovered. Printed recruitment materials and the brigade's website were filled with military police vernacular and sample evidence of training sessions conducted since February of 2003 to build skills in land navigation, radio communications, firearms, handcuffing techniques, evidence collection, and crime scene preservation. A far cry from MP missions involving parking cars. This activity was clearly encouraged by the brigade commander. Clandestine activities that managed to fly under the radar of those in his chain of command. On September 21st, 2005, this same commander issued a directive requesting all personnel of the 19th Military Police Brigade to report for duty at City Hall in Lufkin, Texas, to, quote, provide shelter management, mass care, security, and other requested support to civilian authority in response to evacuation events regarding Hurricane Rita. The directive also stated, uniform of the day is BDU and patrol cap. All personnel will bring beret, Kevlar helmet, MP brassard, and LBE but will not wear them unless and until directed. So how exactly did this renegade East Texas Brigade overstep the bounds of limited authority granted them during the shelter management? The shelter management operation in the days surrounding Rita's approach and subsequent landfall. How the 19th Brigade went awry. To begin with, rather than follow direct orders issued by the governor to assist local Red Cross appointed hosts to establish and manage shelter operations according to the witnesses of the 19th Brigade, literally commanded all 30 shelters in the Lufkin area. Guardsmen in at least one shelter proceeded to intimidate and mistreat hundreds of displaced citizens who ended up residing as evacuees in that shelter. I was one of those evacuees. Written sworn statements, surveys, and interviews with members of the Texas State Guard, shelter directors, and evacuees after the fact bear this out. According to the investigative report containing those findings, the 19th Brigade operated an unregulated militia during Hurricane Rita and shelter operations that characterizes the overall climate of the brigade in years prior to Katrina and Rita as a recruitment tool and training ground for military police. Also identified were several other errors made by the 19th Brigade during Hurricane Rita's shelter operations. These snafus clearly violated the Texas State Guard Code of Conduct and specific written orders handed down the chain of command to troops prior to shelter operations. Number 1, the visible display of weapons. Number 2, wearing of MP brassards. Number 3, using quote-unquote policing enforcement tactics rather than performing unarmed security. Number 4, failure to follow headquarters directives, which led to guardsmen taking independent and unauthorized actions. The report confirms that the most members of the 19th Brigade wore visible weapons when reporting for shelter duty during Hurricane Rita. According to an evacuee who witnessed this, it was intimidating enough to be in a shelter by no choice of our own. Seeing the guardsmen wearing guns and shouting at us as though through bullhorns made us feel like criminals, not the law-abiding citizens that we are. Likewise, for the guardsmen's blatant display of military brassards. According to witnesses at one shelter, some of the offending guardsmen were not wearing name tags on their uniforms. Instead of utilizing in-house microphones and sound systems of the local shelter facilities, members of the Guard chose instead to communicate with civilian evacuees using bullhorns, shouting such phrases as, "If we smell you, we will tell you." This, despite a reported shortage of available showers facilities provided for evacuees' use. Alert evacuees observed guardsmen assigned to one Lufkin shelter repeatedly abusing their authority. They claimed the guardsmen employed intimidation tactics, resulting in mistreatment and humiliation of evacuees, many of whom were too emotionally distraught under the circumstances to defend themselves. Fresh from New Orleans and Katrina duty at the Superdome, guardsmen were determined not to let history repeat itself. But what they don't know is that a handful of evacuees secretly observed and documented details and incidents of abuse as they occurred. I was one of them. The documented incidents included racial slurs, harassing mentally ill and disabled persons, and other traumatized, defenseless evacuees who didn't know whether or not they had homes to return to. Blowing the whistle. Upon returning home, these incidents of abuse were outlined by a very small group of outraged evacuees in a 4-page certified letter, which was mailed to the top 7 Texas State Guard commanders across the state, demanding a full investigation. The letter got swift attention. Within 2 days of receipt of the letter, phone interviews were conducted and corrective action was initiated. A special investigator was appointed and a 5-month internal investigation commenced. The end result. The resulting investigative report confirmed the violations outlined above and more. To its credit, the report outlines some of the unclassified corrective actions taken by the Texas State Guard, including initiation of a statewide overhaul of the Texas State Guard command structure and re-education of all brigades, during which all volunteers were instructed on how to properly treat civilians in shelter operations in the future. The colonel in charge of the 19th Brigade was permanently relieved of command. It was recommended that, with the exception of key personnel, the entire 19th Brigade should be made to stand down for a period of 60 days, announce a transition away from the military police structure, and carefully determine which guardsmen should not be retained but be discharged. In the end, at least on the surface, justice appears to have been served. The Texas State Guard can take bows for quickly assuming an aggressively proactive stance within its chain of command. However, only time will tell if the lessons learned after Rita will stick the next time a serious threat occurs within the Texas borders, requiring military assistance. Perhaps for now, the Texas State Guard as a whole deserves to remain in the category of friend rather than foe. After all, the grievous actions of one renegade brigade are not necessarily reflective of the proud history, heritage, and service of the entire organization. However, had good citizens not cried foul, the evil deeds of the 19th Brigade might have gone unchecked. It seems Edmund Burke's words are as true today as the day he wrote them. One thing is certain, by employing persistence, patience, and taking specific action when government or military leaders fail us during times of crisis, we as ordinary citizens can ultimately have a positive impact on how future crises will be managed. Who says actions taken by one small group of citizens can't make a difference? And I was one of those citizens. I'm the one that I think screamed the loudest about all of this. And as I said, I was there at the shelter, on the floor, sleeping on my bedding that I brought from home because they didn't have enough cots for everyone in the shelter. And I was sick as a dog, and so I had nothing better to do but to sit and document what I observed going on there in the shelter. So I guess I say all that to say that I am a whistleblower from way back, and I get down into the weeds on investigating for myself and doing research. I went back on the Texas State Guard website when I got home, because when I got home I was so traumatized I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat for like 2 weeks. I just thought somebody has got to know what's going on and take some kind of action. And it took me about a week just to write it all out. But I wrote a letter to the command structure, as mentioned in this article, and I CC'd 7 of the top commanders, according to the website of the Texas State Guard, so that in case one of them got it and decided it wasn't worth looking at or looking into, there were others that would get it. So if some copies went into the trash can, surely there would be 1 or 2 out of the 7 who would take this seriously, and one of them did. There's quite a backstory to this story about how we ended up in the shelter. My husband and I were supposed to go to a hotel just a little bit north and east of where the shelter was, but due to the evacuation process and the fact that it took us like 10 hours to get what would normally be a 2-hour drive, and our hotel reservations fell through when we called to check on them. I had made hotel reservations for a town in East Texas called White House, Texas, and when I called to check on my reservations, when we were almost to Lufkin, they told us, I'm sorry, your reservations were not made for White House, Texas, they were made for White House, Tennessee. And I just about fainted at that point. I'm normally not a very emotionally reactive person, but I was so tired. I'd been driving all day. My husband and I had driven both of our vehicles. He was in our truck that was stuffed to the gills, and I was in our car that was also stuffed to the gills, because we didn't know if we were going to be able to come home to our house or not. We were pulling our pop-up camper in case we had to stay in that for an indefinite amount of time. But I wrote another little thing right after this happened, because the attitude of the Texas State Guard who burst into the shelter that day and screamed through bullhorns at us really, really got under my skin. It takes a lot to get me pumped up and wanting to fight back, but that did it for me. So here's one of the things that I wrote shortly after returning home. This one's a little bit shorter. So take a breath, take a sip. And let's finish this up. So I wrote, words of wisdom to the wise, or those who would seek wisdom. I am a recent evacuee of Hurricane Rita. I am not a criminal. I am not a prisoner of war. I am not an animal to be herded like cattle. I am not deaf, dumb, or blind. I am not a wayward schoolchild. I am an American citizen, fully aware of both the rights and responsibilities that come with American citizenship. I'm employed, I'm intelligent, educated, mature, decent, honest, caring, capable, and willing to do my part. I'm worthy of basic respect and trust until there's a reason for someone not to respect or trust me. I'm also exhausted, frustrated, frightened, anxious, and angry. And none of that has anything to do with the inhumane way that you have treated me and other innocent citizens while at this shelter. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad that you and your men are here to protect and serve and keep order. That's all. Granted, I am not accustomed to the military way of life, but that does not give you the right to disrespect or abuse me under any circumstances, much less this situation. I am accustomed to making my own decisions about where I will go, what I will do, and when, and most of the time I make good decisions. I was taking care of myself way before you were born. I'm speaking to the guy that was left in charge of the shelter, who was a young, arrogant man. I was taking care of myself way before you were born, son, so don't think for a moment that I need your help to manage my personal affairs now. I may not look like you, smell like you, or conduct my personal affairs the way you do, but that does not give you the right to act as if you are somehow superior to me, especially at a time like this, at a Red Cross shelter and on American soil, no less. Please pardon me if I fail to adhere to every single word that falls from your lips. I am slightly preoccupied right now. For one thing, I'm not 100% sure that all members of my family are out of harm's way. Neither am I certain that I will have a home to return to when this ordeal is over. I now find myself in a strange environment, living among several hundred strangers, a place I've never been before, a place I would not choose to be, had I a choice in the matter. I also have a medical condition that is difficult to deal with under normal circumstances, much less the extremely stressful circumstances under which I now find myself. Your presence in this place, sir, has added greatly to my stress level. I find it hard to concentrate on tasks that are usually second nature to me because The undue stress of your overbearing presence in this shelter has created extra stress for me. I did not sign up for military boot camp, and I refuse to respect you as a commander, quote unquote, if you cannot show me basic respect for the situation I find myself in. By no fault of my own, I might add. If you want my respect, sir, you'll have to earn it the old-fashioned way. You are not my commander, and I am not under your command. I understand that with this, many people crammed into such tight quarters, that some rules are required in order to keep order. So I hope you'll understand my extreme aversion to being spoken to as if I were an out-of-control child. Where I will go, at what time of the day, and what I can do or not do. A bit of advice. Explain the rules once and leave it at that. I get it, okay? The fact is, I certainly have done nothing wrong to deserve to be treated with anything less than utmost respect and consideration under the circumstances. All I did was follow the instructions of my local officials to evacuate to a place of peace in which to weather the storm. You, sir, have stolen my semblance of peace, any semblance of peace that I may have possessed when I walked into this shelter. Perhaps if we had met under different circumstances, we would have we would have had time to get to know each other and understand and respect each other. But in this circumstance, at this time, and in this place, you, sir, are a discredit and disgrace to your brigade, your uniform, your country, and your maker. I wasn't even supposed to be here, to end up here, and by no fault of my own, I did. Good thing I did, too, because otherwise you would have gone on playing your commando games behind closed doors, intimidating less courageous people with your bully tactics, and no one would have been the wiser. Well, guess what? I may be only a single voice, but I represent many others whose voices have been silenced by intimidation and who may not possess the ability to speak out. I will speak out. And with God as my witness, I will not tolerate harsh, rude, or inappropriate treatment at the hands of my own government representatives without a fight. I will shout it from the rooftops if I have to, in order to keep others from witnessing or experiencing the horrors I have witnessed and experienced in the past few days. Furthermore, I will do everything in my power to remind those of you who supposedly represent our military, once again, that strong-arm military tactics do not belong in a civilian situation. Surely your extensive military training has not programmed all of the humanity out of you? If so, I pity you. I remind you once again, sir, you work for me. So give me a break, okay? Remember, I am a recent evacuee of Hurricane Rita. So, even a person who is normal, quiet, decent, non-combative, avoids conflict whenever possible, went to the absolute extreme.
any of us can be capable of indifferent than our normal way of being. And I don't know if I have time to read this or not. I don't think I will. I sat in bed space, church's gymnasium, and document incidents that happened that I witnessed, ring the very people who came to that shelter, which was listed one for senior and disabled people. They were intimidating them. They were yelling at them in the middle of the night. I witnessed all of this. They were shouting racial slurs. Some of the people who were, we had a lot of races represented. Anyway, it was absolutely horrifying to me to see what was going on. And I tried to be disappointed as the commander for that particular shelter but he wasn't wearing a name, which they were supposed to. When my husband and I finally decided after 4 days to leave the shelter, which we had the freedom to do because we owned vehicles, many of the other people had been bussed in and didn't have the option to leave. In fact, we adopted who were next to us, gone through Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana, and here, a month later, they found themselves just again by hurricane. So, it's really hard to for me to describe things that I witnessed there, that I wouldn't wish on enemy. But I guess in all of this is to say that if you find your similar circumstance, and you're only one person and you think I do, I was actually sick the time period that we were there. My husband, who had several disabilities, is wound up in that particular shelter, but I had a respiratory infection, and I was not doing at all. Felt compelled to document the incidents and the time and the detailed on what these men do to people in there. It was absolutely me. So I want to say, if you find yourself in a similar circumstance, don't discount the fact that you do have a voice. You can. When I got home and I wrote that to the top 7 in the Texas State Guard, 2 nights later I got a phone call from the internal investigator there, similar to an internal, police state position. And he had about a 2.5 or 3 hour phone call. I know he was trying, is this just his woman, overreacting to what took place in the shelter? And after our phone call, he took me seriously. able to actually share with him facts and details that I witnessed that concerned him enough that he opened a wide investigation. And the result of the investigation proved that about 90-something% claimed able to find evidence of tell me that us can't make a difference if we put and think about, other situations that may occur. I thought about the future natural disasters that happen. And here in Texas, we have them quite often. So, in my mind, I was not only doing a survey who had gone through this experience, and by the way, I did talk to several of the other evacuees that were in that shelter, a dozen of them. And they all fell away. But most of them were elderly and they did not have the communication skills I have. So I decided to take it upon myself to report this incident, this situation, and to follow through with it. And I am an absolute bulldog, and you can ask anybody who knows me that persistence is my middle name. Not give up. When I've made up my mind to fight any particular battle. And this is not the only situation in which I played the role of a whistleblower. And I have no fear of, if I know, the truth is, B, I know who the players are, C, I know what the rules are of normal operations. Like in this case, I went back and researched the Texas State Guards, much of which has been taken down by the way, because I was quoting them of their own regulations in the letter that I sent Sanders. And surprised them because I used for a private investigator, so I get down to the details in such and find the evidence and facts and communicate to the appropriate people to get things accomplished. Okay? I have a very strong sense of justice, and I don't have any power when it comes to, because I am a truth teller, and my Heavenly Father backs me up on this. So I have no fear. I fear anyone has to come against say that I'm telling lies, because I don't. So I could go into more detail, but I know you're probably tired tonight, and I'm this story is a bit out for my brain, for my eyes, and I apologize if I messed up, but I'm very small print. 20 years ago, I do have a little device that helps me to see, but it's not exactly big enough to cover a whole page. Anyway, folks, I'm not apologizing for any of this.
I think that this story should have gone public right after it happened. And the fact that it's been 20 years since this happened, I can't even believe it's been 20 years. That just blows my mind. But I want the story to be told, not only for my children and grandchildren, to hear my side of the story, and many of them, well, not many of them, a few of them who were alive back then, actually at least knew of the situation, but they didn't really know the details of what their mom or grandma did. And I'm very proud of the fact that I can say today that the results of my actions caused the Texas State Guard to do a statewide investigation of all of their personnel and to do a retraining of them all so that in the future they will treat civilians in a humane way during natural disasters or civil disturbances. So that's a feather I can put in my hat. And it's not the only one. I have other stories of playing the role of a whistleblower, and I never lose. So trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I've had to do the same in courts of law. I am not an attorney, but I play one on TV. No, I have Almighty God on my team, and believe you me, I pray before every incident. And you know, I'll leave you with this thought. At the end of this, right before my husband and I decided to jump in our cars and leave this shelter, the young man who had been left in charge of that shelter came out, followed us into the parking lot. And I had written him a personal letter that I had folded up, and as we were leaving, I held up that letter and I tapped him on his military markings on his uniform and said, "Read it and weep." And then we jumped in our cars and disappeared. Later, I learned from talking to the primary investigator that when they gathered the pastor's staff of that church and the military guys who were left there, that young man was actually weeping as he described me doing that to him. I guess I must have intimidated him. I don't know. But I really meant it. When I say things I don't say things to people that I don't mean. I don't play games with people, okay? I am who I am. I mean what I say, and most people get that. And I guess he got that day because he was emotionally distraught, according to that main investigator. I've got a file about this thick of all of the background evidence pages that I printed off of the Texas State Guard's website after I got home, which many of which have disappeared now, of course, but I have all the markings, I have all the pages, proving that this particular brigade, anyway, was recruiting people under that military police concept. Young men who had something to prove, or what do they say? Something about a grind. And I also printed off all of their own. I went into their archives and found all of their own code of conduct by paragraph, like numbered paragraph. Paragraph 1243.9 says, and I also did research on the governor's decrees that had been sent out, and this brigade had violated every single one. Governor Perry was the governor of Texas at that time, and these guys just walked all over everything he told them to do. So, Mama has spoken. And I hope that you will speak up if you're ever in a situation where you feel like something's going on that shouldn't be going on. I hope that you will speak to the appropriate authorities and go through the proper channels. Don't take it upon yourself to do anything against anyone, because I am famous for saying, and I just said it this past earlier this week during our family Thanksgiving, when we were talking about some situations that my grandchildren are involved in. And I told them, I said, the best policy is stay in your own lane. Don't engage with people unless there's something abusive going on. Don't try to engage anybody directly. You go to the proper authorities and report things, but you don't have to speak to the people who are actually committing the crimes. Anyway, I think I've kept you guys here longer than usual, and this has been a very unusual kind of but like I said, I'm just to record for history's sake, for my family. This was the biggest one. I mean, taking on the entire state of Texas and the state guard. It doesn't get much bigger than that. Okay, folks, well, this is being recorded on November 30th, 2025. And tomorrow is December 1st, and we're looking at Christmas holidays coming up, and I'm ready to shed all of the negative stuff that I've been personally dealing with, and there's been quite a bit behind the scenes recently, and I'm ready to let that go and enjoy the holiday season with my family and friends. And I wish you all a wonderful month of December. I'm going to try to come back more often. Instead of once a month, I may go to once a week with videos from here on out, because when I was digging through my archives and I found this particular story, which I wanted to share, I found another stack of stories that are much less serious than this one, and maybe a little more entertaining. Anyway, folks, take care, enjoy your holiday season with your families, and I will see you in the next video.